Alrighty, it looks like we're starting to connect. Can you hear me, Darren?
I can hear you.
All right, awesome. That means everybody else can hear us. Welcome to Talk Recovery Radio, everyone. My name is Giuseppe Ganci, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren, how's it going?
It's all good, man. Good
All
to see your
good.
face.
Good to see your face too. Yeah, we haven't physically seen each other in a while. Looking forward to this all. I got my speaker on my other computer. Got to shut that off. Okay, here we go. Still in physical distancing, but we're still bringing to the airways Talk Recovery Radio, helping to overcome addiction. Darren, how's it going?
It's good. You know what? I'm just super appreciative of the viewership on our Zoom programs. I don't know. It makes me feel happy that we continue to do this as best as we could, and the guests are available. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm super stoked.
For those of you that are familiar with Talk Recovery, we come live every Thursday, noon to 1 on 100.5 FM, Vancouver Co-op Radio. Part of their COVID responses, they've shut the studio down to shows, but shout out to Kimmett, who will rebroadcast this show next week on the radio. If you're tuning in on 100.5 FM right now, you're going to hear last week's show. So thanks, Kimmett, for organizing the rebroadcasting. 6 years of shows. Pretty excited about that. Hundreds of guests.
It's just unfortunate that if you're listening to this show right now, because we're on Facebook Live, we're unable to play any music.
Oh, yes.
You know, so I mean, I'm still listening to music at home. Got the record player behind me. I'm listening to Van Morrison right now. I mean, you got to have the music blaring at some point during your day.
You sent a message a couple of days ago about music and the show. What are your plans? You want to put music on our Facebook page, or
well, I mean, anytime I'm on social media, like, you just get pounded with the media outlets that, who knows how objective, subjective they are, and it just gets drawn into this like worry or fear that's already and should be there to some extent. But anytime I'm going through and there's some musical content, I mean, there's a lot of artists getting together right now and picking a song that sort of lyrically, relates to what's going on right now. And it's the only time I feel, like a little chill of appreciation, excitement. And so, yeah, well, I wanted to post some of those types of videos on the Talk Recovery page.
We can't broadcast the music live on the show because Facebook will copyright it and shut it off. So sadly, we got no music while we're doing no intro song, our wonderful intro song. Alberta has just announced that 12-step programs are essential services. And it's a symbolism in that province that like they really like have this genuine belief that like recovery needs to be encouraged during a pandemic. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. The liquor stores are open. I'm not arguing. I don't think it's a stupid idea. It makes sense that would be something that remains open. The big box, grocery stores, all these sorts of things. Hey, it's there, but you're also in those places coming into contact for, while you're trying to gather your essential food items or whatever. And there's a lot of people out there that I think is just that recovery oriented space of a meeting, whether it's 12-step or whatever. I think they specified 12-step meetings.
Yeah, mutual support groups like AA and NNA and so forth. They're going to create some guidelines, but the symbolism is why I wanted to bring it up. There's most provinces with the head, healthcare people Like they don't even say the word mutual support group. Alcoholics Anonymous is even a viable option. And so it's just the contrast in what's going on province to province and so forth. So big shout out to Alberta for sticking up for recovery. And obviously they're not saying like open up like 200-person meetings and have everybody stuffed in a room. It's just the symbolism of it. So I wanted to bring that up to the other provinces in Canada because we are a national show, and Alberta is putting recovery a priority, and everything needs to be a priority. And it's unfortunate that we have to make this kind of announcement. It's almost like it's unfortunate we have to tell people not to drink bleach. Like it's just a stupid statement that we have to make, but we have to make it. And it's like, yeah, we have to make this statement that 12-step program is evidence-based. It's, it helps millions of people, and it's an essential service. The fact that we have to say it is ridiculous, but we're saying it because we have to. So Talk Recovery Radio isn't just about the 12 steps. We have interviewed every type of pathway you can imagine over the 6 years. We support all pathways as long as it gets you well. And you can replay all of our shows on Co-op Radio's website, but we're on iTunes, we're on Facebook here because you're listening to us, but you can go to our other streams on iTunes as well, YouTube channel, and that's all on talkrecoveryradio.com. You can get all the links there. It's Co-op Radio's 45th anniversary, and so they're doing a fundraiser. They've raised $27,000 so far. So special shout out to all the donors, and you can still donate to the fundraiser. You go to coopradio.org, and you can be a member of Co-op Radio. It helps support our show and all that kind of stuff. We don't get paid to do this, but it pays for all the technology that they use and so forth. So you can go to coopradio.org. And most importantly, Talk Recovery Radio is powered by New West Recovery, which is made up of Last Door and Westminster House, Canada's addiction recovery community. And we have 2 guests on our shows, and I'm going to let Darren open up the show here. Darren, who is our first guest, and who are we talking recovery with today?
Yeah, today we get to talk recovery with Matt Johnston. There you are. Welcome to our house, Matt Johnston. You are a professional firefighter here in Metro Vancouver and a mental health clinician. Tell me a little bit, like, I think we all know what a firefighter is.
Matt, you're on mute, Matt. When you want to take yourself off? Sorry, Darren.
That's okay.
How's that?
Hey, man.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So what is the mental health clinician part, and how does that relate to your firefighting career?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I was a mental health professional first and firefighter second. And I guess the short end of that stick, or the answer, is that I ran on the Canadian national team and found that the student athlete lifestyle worked really well for me. And so I finished a master's in psychology at a UBC fairly young, about 25, 26, and started a practice in New Westminster on 544 Columbia Street in the old CIBC bank building there. And worked there in private practice for about 6 or 7 years. And then I decided to transition into firefighting. So yeah, it's a fairly unique background. And I just found I wanted to be part of a team again, and working kind of alone in isolation in a second floor office space kind of wasn't going to bring me a lot of lifetime satisfaction.
No doubt. Well, nothing like a community of firefighters, I guess. Hey, so like, did you assume that your practice or your education as a psychologist would like, influence your role and bring an asset to the firefighters, or was it a completely separate like goal in that?
Yeah. No, it's interesting how it all evolved, and like many things, it came out of tragedy, for the most part. But just going back, I'm a registered clinical counselor. I have a master's in counseling psychology. So I'm not a registered psychologist, just so we make that very clear. But yeah, so really what happened is we had a trend of suicides in the fire service in 2015 in the Lower Mainland here, and unfortunately extended for quite some time into other departments as well. And the BC Professional Firefighters Association had been interested in looking into how to be more proactive with mental health, not only in the fire service, but across all first responder groups. And WorkSafe BC simultaneously in 2015 created the First Responder Steering Committee. So all this was happening together in 2015, and that's kind of when my background kind of came to light.
Right. So that, I mean, 2015, that's so recent.
Yeah.
Was this like just a trend that had built up as far as the suicide goes, or was there something that happened in and around that time?
It's a great question. Suicides have, obviously been around as long as humans have. And so it wasn't like this concept or this phenomenon was new, but I think just the acuity of it was. I know in the Lower Mainland, there were 2 suicides in a department 7 weeks apart. And I think that really shook the fire service to our knees. And we wanted to find a way to stem the bleeding, so to speak. And so I think that's where there's a lot of attention put on how we can alleviate, members from following through with thoughts and feelings around suicide.
Yeah. I mean, the notion of PTSD or the, the clinical notion of it has been around for quite some time. Mm-hmm. Like, has it been, in the past, like something that just no one wants to admit to, or, no specific community wants to think, oh, it's because of what firefighters do, or just individually speaking, admitting that they're unable to handle what they've seen. Mm-hmm. And so, like, it wasn't until 2015 that somebody said, like, we need to look at these, the first responder community specifically.
Yeah. Well, 2015 was an interesting time in the fire service. There was money being put into starting to evaluate the mental health of first responders across Canada, which led to a 2017 finding out of the Canadian Institute for Public Safety and Research that close to half of all public safety personnel in Canada struggled with symptoms consistent with one or more psychological disorder. Bit of a mouthful, but long story short, that there was a large percentage of public safety personnel in Canada that was, in the red, essentially. Right. And I think what we also saw is a campaign by WorkSafe here in BC that's called Share It, Don't Wear It, where there was a movement to destigmatize reaching out for help. And yeah. So we gave more permission to firefighters, corrections, Canadian Border Services, what have you, to say, if you're struggling, there's help out there. And so there's been a major cultural shift within first responder groups that I have been a part of, not just firefighting, but other stakeholders, where talking about mental health is almost routine around a coffee table. And that's really great. And it's consistent with, and talking to Giuseppe, your guys' perspective on, the Human Recovery Capital conference movement of, sharing these struggles and normalizing them. It's not 1 in 5 are struggling with mental health issues. We all struggle at somewhere in our lives. It's 5 out of 5.
I mean, to think that it's something that, because I'm a weak human being, I wasn't able to do my job, and I'm failing psychologically because I can't, mentally cope with it. Yeah. I mean, it's just such a ridiculous notion when you think of, what the first responders are dealing with on a daily basis. Oh, yeah. But I guess it's a human condition, isn't it, to sort of just think, I can handle this.
For sure. And for the most part, we do a very good job of handling it. And most people in society do. I mean, life is not easy right now for anyone. And when we normalize that, we start to realize that human connection is the key to safeguarding our mental health and preserving our mental health and well-being. And I think that most first responders, when they struggle, it might actually be one of the first times in their life where they've felt that they can't control their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Because in order to get hired in the public safety industry, it's very hard to get employment. There's 7-8 month processes, boot camps. These are things that most people would never try in civilian life. And so getting back to the beginnings of our career, we're all naturally very resilient.
Yeah.
And so when we look at it through that lens, that's when we can go with the health and well-being perspective of normalizing struggle and always recognizing that no matter the severity of the psychological injury, there's always hope in a new beginning.
So there's, Darren, I wanted to ask, so there is this two-step process here though. So once you remove the stigma of asking for help, then there's also the conversation is how to help. And that's part of first responder health. It's like, how do you help the helpers? And it's the conversation there where, you know, the firefighter is dealing with trauma on a daily basis, you know, when he's going on site and how that affects them. And then they have this industry that, you know, up until a few years ago, didn't know how to help people that help. And so touch on that and how did we, are we fixing that problem? Have we fixed it?
Yeah. Well, until mental health professionals become regulated in BC, there's always going to be a fragmented landscape of where to go and what services are a best fit. So if a firefighter or anyone for that matter in society is functioning in the red and goes to a clinician for a 50-minute session once a week, they're probably going to feel quite let down. That's like going to a massage therapist when you're 14 weeks into a marathon training program. You know, like your muscles are not going to get loosened up in one session for more than a few hours. And so what I'm trying to do is teach first responders to access what we call upstream mental health care, which is that it begins in the beginning and throughout one's career so that you have that relationship built with a clinician. The flip side of it is who are these clinicians and how do you find them? And I think that's what we're getting into, Giuseppe, is civilian clinicians, very few have been trained in how to work with public safety members. It's a very unique specialization and a fairly unique personality that works well with. And I think we also see that in the addictions field, where there's a very specific type of person that gets it, right? And so that's what I'm working kind of upstream against. And we've had a lot of success, our team here, of training clinicians on what it's like to be hired as a first responder, what it's like to go through a 20, 30-year career with this backpack that gets filled with rocks. And we're not just talking about, you know, large T trauma exposures on the job, but how our shift patterns and sleep debt interact with our life and family life to often create a feeling of a siloed sense that no matter where I go, I kind of feel a little bit guarded, on edge, hypervigilant, and I'm not exactly sure why. And, you know, we can get into how that works from a neurobiological standpoint, but in reality, the everyday organic experience of that is quite mystifying to first responders. And how do you then take that reality and connect them to culturally competent service providers, from the clinician in private practice all the way to, you know, the last door with inpatient treatment services? It's very complex, fragmented, and a challenging series of events that have to take place.
No doubt. And so in 2017, you created the occupational awareness training program is you know, with the healthcare professionals. Did you find that, like, basically, I mean, it's just teaching PTSD to people who have not experienced it, and how different is that?
I'll give some shout out here, is that as much as I might be considered the creator, this was built in collaboration with the BC professional firefighters and their mental health task force, and also supported by WorkSafe BC. So I have a small army of people helping me kind of change the mental health landscape here in BC. And quite frankly, I'm really proud of what our team's been able to achieve. And the basis of this training really is to train clinicians on looking at post-traumatic stress as an injury rather than a disorder, and specifically an acquired stress injury that's a normal reaction to a series of abnormal events. And if it's considered abnormal by a first responder standard, it would petrify most civilians in society, because we have a different standard that we experience because our exposure to trauma is so much more frequent than most people in civilian life.
Right. I'm curious, once you have the ideal healthcare professional that's trained, that's able to identify behaviors and create new patterns for an individual that's willingly sitting in the chair. But when it comes to PTSD, sometimes it's not unnoticed until the suicide or until the very end. And so is there education for, the colleagues themselves, to call each other out if there is there a different culture changing there, or is there?
There is an evolving culture there. The challenge with any paramilitary, stratified, hierarchical organizational structure is that new recruits tend to be trained in a paramilitary style, where, to put it bluntly, they have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth.
Right.
And that traditional message then builds throughout one's career, where it's unsafe or you feel weak if you have to reach out for support. Yeah. And so what we've seen over the last 10 years or so is the revolution and refined training of a formalized peer support training program within many departments, not only in the fire service, but if you look at most public safety organizations, they have peer colleagues on the job that are trained in active listening and even suicide risk assessment. And I think that has tremendous value, but the jury is still out on how effective that is from an empirically validated study. And the other thing that we kind of talk about here that you alluded to is training new recruits and firefighters throughout, which is very important, on resiliency training, on having the tools and equipment to recognize signs that might be unhealthy. And of course, as the severity of our struggles increase, our self-awareness decreases. There's that inverse correlation. So the resiliency training is not just for the person, the individual, but it's for colleagues to kind of look at some warning signs that might come out. Now, another challenge to that, what we're seeing is that resiliency training is, again, similar to peer support in that there's a lack of evidence to say it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. And ethically, what we're seeing is if you teach resiliency to a single individual that's dealing with a toxic work environment, you can kind of see how unethical that potentially could be. In other words, the onus is on you to be able to tolerate and be resilient and thrive in this tremendously toxic environment, which I'm not saying public safety is like that, but there are a few workplaces that you could describe as toxic. And so we really, as this evolves, really have to look at organizational stressors and how we can address that elephant in the room to make it more permission giving for everyone to, as WorkSafe says, share it, don't wear it.
Well, I think any workplace that isn't talking about it being okay to talk about mental health and reaching out is a toxic workplace. So having that conversation where it's okay, helps remove some of that toxicity and so forth. And in regards to that, and being a firefighter, you're with the same people for so many hours a day. I mean, that elephant in the room of not being able to ask for help could be, that's a big barrier. So, you say resiliency, some people watching and listening to our show might not know what that means, or not sure how to build resiliency. Do you have any tips for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, well, I think of a mentor of mine named Dr. Rick Hansen, and he's a New York Times bestselling author, neuropsychologist out of the Bay Area. And I don't want to quote him because I'll butcher the way he says it, but resiliency to him in some ways is surviving the worst day of your life and thriving in most days of your life. And so, I know that resiliency is becoming this buzzword and maybe overused, but I really like the way that Dr. Hansen talks about it in terms of a positive psychology. And so resiliency to me is acknowledging that life is difficult, that we all are facing some sort of battle throughout our lives, and that we can survive this and have an inherent hope to continue to move towards self-growth, like Darren's picture behind him on the wall. It's and that's what we got to keep in mind, is just everything in nature has this inherent resistance and this odds against them, whether it's the flowers and the soil getting enough water and sunlight, and life is precious and delicate. But even when we bloom, there's still threats and challenges to keeping healthy. And there's so many challenges within society, as you guys well know in your fields of addiction, that have us, constantly want to often escape from reality. And I really think that that's what, if we're getting into addiction, is a significant compulsion, right? To find ways to cope with an external agent rather than with our heart and our mind.
Yeah, it's, I mean, just the consideration of, having gone through an experience, traumatic, to put aside, well, I'm just doing my job and sort of leave it at work. Like to just know that as human beings with souls and relationships and, sometimes confused sense of purpose, like this, it's not so black and white, and to compare, what one individual went through compared to what that individual went through, and I shouldn't be, coping so poorly, he had it worse. And I mean, there's so many complex factors in getting to the place where I feel okay admitting that I need help with the problem that I'm going through, as an individual.
Yeah.
Is there this discussion, like if I wanted to become, a first responder, a police, a paramedic, can we do without prejudice a form of screening, to see already how someone is able to cope with anything, or is that aside the point? Or are we bringing that into the conversation now?
Well, I mean, there's many different angles that I could answer that question. The hiring process for these jobs involve a lot of psychometric testing that weeds out, and I wouldn't be able to tell you what they're weeding out, but weeds out certain risk factors. But having said that, I see reaching out as a sign of strength rather than weakness. And what we've seen in the fire service over the last generation is a tremendous history of really strong personalities, being, what society would see as a man's man. And what we often see in hindsight is the tremendous toll that took on their individual emotional health. And so we're moving towards what some would call a softer generation, but I would say a generation that is more proactive on their mental health, that normalizes the need to reach out at certain points in your life, Because for me as a first responder, I've already gone to 3,000 calls, and I'm in my 8th year. I'm sorry, but if someone's going to come on your radio and say that that's not going to warrant the need to access some sort of healthy way of processing this experience, they're not human. And if they are, they're not living life to the fullest, in my opinion. And so that's the message that I hope that I get out to my colleagues. But, it's hope that everyone in society can hear as well. And, if it's not talk therapy because it's cost prohibitive, there's more effective ways than talk therapy that are free, such as getting out in fresh air, such as family and social connection. These are all things that have been proven over the millennia to keep us healthy and survive whatever obstacles we faced in our ancestry, right?
Well, the most bizarre part of this is, in the occupational health world, when it comes to addiction and mental health, when someone's in despair and someone's suffering, and the family is intervening and the workplace is intervening, like everybody in the world knows you have a problem, but almost 9 out of 10, it's like, I don't want to lose my job, I don't want to take time off work, I don't want to, the people at the shop, what they're going to think about me. But when we know on the other side, it's like, when you get through this, like, you're going to be looked up to. You're going to be like people don't lose their jobs in Canada for trying to get well. Yeah. And, it's very difficult to put people through that journey. So the work that you're doing is helping that, because it's reassuring people. So if you're a firefighter, or your loved one's a firefighter, or your friend's a firefighter, and you know what's going on, that the fire hall doesn't know what's going on, there are ways out, and so forth, and you can get the help, and you can help them, and make sure that they're fit for work and at work, and living the best life that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the conference you hosted in New West, the Recovery Capital Conference, where you had Ross Laird talk, and it was one of the most impactful hours of my professional life, listening to him explain trauma and addiction. And he said most of the time, but not always, people who survive trauma look back and in a way feel blessed that they experienced it, because it opened up, a new side of life to explore and thrive in, and appreciate, the humble things in life that they may have been disconnected from leading into and through that addiction. So yeah, I do see, and that's where we're talking about the whole post-traumatic growth of the mental health and wellness perspective, that unfortunately, traditionally has really, I believe, added to the stigma and resistance of stoic audiences and first responder culture, and men in general, and I'm overgeneralizing, women as well, but men in general are disconnected from, the counseling experience before they're in absolute crisis. So, I'm hoping we change that over time.
We will. We are. We got literally like 2 minutes here, maybe a minute and a half. So I appreciate you being on the show. Darren, any final thoughts?
Well, I was watching a sort of a documentary news thing. A woman was following paramedics in northern Italy, and they were going back to this old age home, and tending to people, and the woman, that, like, an elderly woman, she's masked up. She'd been fevered and for a couple of days, and her symptoms weren't getting better. And the paramedics are in complete, I don't know if you call it hazmat sort of wear, but they're completely covered, like astronauts almost, and surrounding this woman, and she's terrified. Where am I going? Where are you taking me? And you could see the impossibility of offering her some connection because of the face mask and the gloves, and they're just trying to do their job. But the paramedic was just trying his best to put his hand on her arm and reassure she was okay. And it's just some of these jobs, as tough as you want to be, they demand, the individual to reach out and tend to that fear that's going on. And that if as a first responder, allow yourself to be that version of your job, you cannot help but respond humanely in that way and deal with the pain and the concern afterwards. And I just see that, that to do that brings about that, sort of more easily to become, a victim to the trauma and that. And I haven't seen, the Vancouver first responders, firsthand, but we bang our pots for the doctors and the nurses, and I hope we're including, all you guys and the paramedics that are out there. And I appreciate that's the new culture that you're part of bringing into this.
Yeah, it's an exciting time, and there's lots of opportunity for hope and growth. And my end goal is to have firefighters and all public safety have life expectancy to Canadian averages, right? We're dying young, and we don't want to see that happen. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Yeah, so firstresponderhealth.org is the website. You can get details there, how to get help. There's a directory on there as well. And you launched online courses for service providers to help service providers, trainings, and all the details are on there. So First Responder Health, it's online. You can go to that. And thank you so much, Matt, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to working with you more and so forth, and helping our first responders get well.
Great. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Take care.
Take care.
All righty. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio, and we come to you live every Thursday, and coming to you live from Zoom Live. Right now, the radio station is practicing physical distancing, so the radio station is shut down. So we've created a new way to come to you live. If you're listening to us on the radio, you're hearing last week's show, and Kimmit is uploading the show a week later. And we bring you guests every week to talk about the many different pathways to recovery. Darren just finished an awesome interview with Matt Johnston from First Responder Health. And it's Co-op Radio's 45th anniversary. They raised $27,000 for their spring fundraiser. Thanks to all the donors. You can still donate, and the money goes towards all the technology that goes behind operating a radio show. We don't get paid for this. It's all volunteer run. So if you love Co-op Radio like we do, please donate to Co-op Radio at coopradio.org. And we've got a returning guest with a new project, and we need some smiles, I think, today. Hello, Lizzie. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hi, Giuseppe. Hi, Darren. How are you today?
Hey, Lizzie. Good, thanks.
Lizzie Allen, comedian, been on the show before talking about addictive comedy. You've been an MC at Recovery Day for us with Darren on one of our stages. And just recently launching a new project called Hilarapy. What's Hilarapy?
Well, Hilarapy is actually our official new branding of comedy. And before we go any further, I just want to say I loved what Matthew had to say. Your last guest was brilliant, and I agreed with so much. Everyone struggles with their mental health. I really like that, and the need to normalize it. Yeah. And not call it a disorder, but an injury. I really like that as well. Comparing physical health to mental health. Nobody has that sort of pure straight line of physical health, just like nobody has that plain sailing, everything's great all the time with their mental health. So I really, really loved what he had to say. I thought it was brilliant. So with Hilarapy, that's really where we're going. We want to normalize it. And with addictive comedy, what we were finding was, even when we did these public shows and the tickets were on sale and that, it's advertised in the paper, people were phoning us up and going, is this for normal people? Can anyone come? And it's like, oh no, it's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. It's for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And so calling it hilarapy, healing with humor. I'm also I'm a registered therapeutic counselor. I mean, Matthew was a registered clinical counselor, I think he was. But I'm a therapeutic counselor, and I've been training for the last, a year ago I finished, and been training for 3 years to doing group work and things like that. And that's really what I've applied to this concept of using comedy to share who we are with the world, to share our personal stories in a way that we show who we are, and it's easier to understand who, the sameness of our human condition and our life experiences.
One of the main questions where people in recovery anyway, that I know, have that moment of change where it's like, when's the last time you had fun? And the idea is like, clubbing or whatever your idea of fun is, but no, like truly like heartfelt fun, like personal fun with other people. And people have that moment where it's just like, I when I was a child, maybe. And I find that like healing with humor is one of those ways of fun therapy where it's just like, I'm getting my heart back. Like I'm having fun that doesn't require hurting other people, places, and things, So I wanted to hear what your thought about that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, humor, laughter, and being able to laugh at ourselves is hugely therapeutic and cathartic in and of itself, but it isn't necessarily a replacement for actual therapy, because therapy really is the tool of kind of having a look at the stuff that causes you pain, facing your pain. And sometimes laughter can be that tool that we use, or that mask we use to not face up fully. So what we do at Hilarapy is we partner group therapy and community and working on some of that stuff using real therapeutic processes, using tools that help us show up vulnerably and create those connections with each other. And at the same time, learning how the tools of comedy, right? The tricks and the trades of writing jokes, performing, and all of those things, but moving together as this group and supporting one another to take what we have to the stage, but without belittling the experience of something that was traumatic or difficult. You see, there has to be a kind of coming to peace with the thing that you're going to do comedy about, because it's not about, okay, I had this really dark time, I'm just going to make you all laugh about it, even though I go home and cry about it still. I think really we need to kind of look at that stuff openly and honestly, with compassion and love for ourselves, in connection with others, and then eventually move through this journey, which is an incredibly difficult journey to take a piece of comedy to stage. It's not easy. And we don't, we don't say it is at all, but we're seeing this huge amount of success with people when they've got the group, when they show up, when they come in and they say, I'm crying today, I'm upset today, I'm dying inside. But then after a while we're playing games and we're back, but we can all sit with that in all seriousness. So you see what I'm trying to say? Behind the scenes, it's not all fun and games, but go on.
I appreciate so much the already existing theme of this support group that I've walked in to a lot of groups in my life for the purpose of therapy, getting help, personal growth, you know what I mean? The intention's there. But I remember, I've walked into so many groups and I don't know how to play this. It's body language first. You don't know what's going on. There's generally a therapist, cross-legged. He's already made the statement that he's different from us. He's the professional. He's the authority. He's got the notepad. He's going to judge us. And then it's okay, if I talk about something, how do I pretend to respond? In shame, with levity, even though that's not authentic, all of these things are going on. And so already walking into a room where the theme is relaxed, like already that the other people there are there to heal some wounds and bring some, like I said, levity to it. Like already knowing that that's the environment and that's the intention of the other people is 100% the difference between walking out of a group therapy session like feeling like that you're just even more broke, or wanting to come back. Mm-hmm. And isn't that it? Like just wanting to come back more than just one session, to assume that this is going to I'm going to need further help, and eventually get to that place where the world didn't just do me personally. It's like these are some things we can all talk about, and if I choose to laugh, right on. Mm-hmm. I think that's amazing.
I learned so much from my recovery and from being part of a 12-step program about the value of fellowship and the value of walking a path together. And for my own personal journey with comedy and using comedy as a way that I could talk about some of this really crazy stuff that I'd been through with my mental health, thinking I was Jesus reincarnated, being sectioned for over 2 months, losing my mind in Thailand. These are not small experiences, but they have meaning to me and value to me as well, even though they were difficult. But I needed to be able to kind of talk about that stuff and own it and have ownership over my story and other parts of my story, like, holding a lot of internalized homophobia. I used comedy, and I used a process which is a mixture of facing it without the laughter and then finding the absurdities and moving to a place where I can talk about it, but also own my shame and be real on stage, not always with the intent to get a laugh. So it's like you can pack a punch with a real statement of who I am as a person and how hurt I have been, blah, 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 and then make a joke to release the tension that doesn't belittle the fact that I'm sharing some very, that I'm not all right with myself, for example. So anyway, what I learned from the recovery aspect was the need to have community and a space where it was healthy for me to get on stage and talk to an audience. So, so we carved out a space as an organization. We put on our own shows, and we state the fact that we don't have alcohol at our shows, for example, and that people know that when they come. So they're coming to see the performer, not coming to eat chicken wings and drink alcohol and hope for the best, right? So we're changing it's like the future of comedy. It's a different way to do comedy.
Well, so many events are now going alcohol free, and that's part of it. I'm here to see the show, not to just get drunk anymore. So the quick version of what happens. So I call you up, or I go on your website, like I go to a group on a weekly basis. I become a comedian. Like what is the program or the service?
Okay, so when we actually had a physical space to meet up, it looked like therapeutic comedy courses that run for 10 weeks. And when you finish the course, you can you're a graduate, and you can come back and become a support member of future courses. So we have a pullback rate of about 60%. And we have currently about 15 graduates who at this very point in time are working towards an online show because we can't meet up in person. They are all at various levels. So you can keep in the community, you can stay in the community, you can keep building your creative work, you can keep supporting other people, and you stay within this community of like-minded people. But now that we're online, at the moment, I've just finalized a free course, which will be available hopefully by the end of May. Our online presence will be available by the end of May, which means you'll be able to go on and for free be able to access therapeutic comedy for beginners, a course. And then if you're interested and that fires you up, then you can keep moving with us online, where we're going to create ways where we can meet as groups, and that the support team can come in and support breakout groups and things like that. And then in the future, we have a club, which we're not calling a club, we're calling Hilarity Studios in White Rock, and that's under construction. So in the future, we have this amazing venue that's going to be available, you know, to do courses and live shows and whatever we want, really.
Oh, that's wonderful news. That's wonderful news. Congratulations on all the successes and continued successes, because you've been at this for a while. You know, publicly, you've said this on stage, and you said it in the show a little while ago. You thought you were Jesus at one point.
Yeah.
So you've got a personal story out there, and I like how you've taken that personal story and turned it into a story to help rather than shock. You know, a lot of people hold on to their stories and bring it out to, I got this shocking story and everybody's all afraid and scared and what to do, but you've taken ownership. What are some of the things, you know, that, like, obviously the Hilarity program is based on this, but therapeutically, what are some of the things that you had to do to get there? Because there's some people watching and listening right now that still have that story, but it's a weight on their shoulder. So, you know, taking Hilarity on and taking some of your courses before Hilarity, what did you do? Did you see a psychiatrist? Did you do the steps? What are some of the things to get to where you're at today?
Of course, being a part of the program, being a part of a 12-step recovery program really, you know, got me kick-started into self-evaluation, the 12 steps, obviously inventory taking, things like that. I was able to start to share my story with other people in a non-judgmental and safe environment. And that was kind of step one. But there were still huge wounds that I carried as an individual around not being able to show up fully for fear that I would be rejected. Like, you know, my feelings weren't safe. In my home when I was growing up, I somehow made it, learnt that me having emotions and feelings kind of made my home life a little bit more difficult. So I started to block that down. So it wasn't until I really dug deep and did my therapeutic training in the last 4 years, I would say, and did a lot of counselling and a lot of looking at myself and deep issue stuff, that I really learned how to be vulnerable. And so that's what I help people with on my courses. I help people and I show them through the techniques and the tools that I was taken through and that I've learned to facilitate, which help us to show up vulnerably in relationship and get met there. And we can revisit old stuff and get the connection that we didn't have when we were a child. And that stuff really informs the way we show up on stage and show up with our stories. And I help people to, you know, like you were saying something, you brought up a really valid point about sort of some people, comedians get up on stage and they shock you, they shock value, you know, this, but they haven't kind of even done any healing on it. It's just something they're going to throw out. They know it's going to get a laugh. It's going to get some sort of reaction. It's going to cause some sort of thing. But to talk about it in a way where you've come to some place of peace with it is incredibly empowering for the audience as well as the performer. And I'm finding that and seeing that again and again and again from the feedback that we get from our audience and the feedback we get from the people who've gone through it. So I challenge people if I think it's sort of shock value stuff. I'm sorry, I'm waffling.
No,
I go off point
great.
a lot. It's a lot of information to impart.
It makes total sense. Total sense.
Yeah, I was just, I mean, it's so different. It's not like, you know, you've got your you're writing your comedy material and you're walking out into front of, just people that have come to a comedy club. Like, I mean, these are your supporters, that are wanting to laugh. They're wanting to see you, just be up in front of each other. Like, knowing that the courage that it takes to just try it out. And like, what a difference for that individual to have, an audience that, like you said, isn't there to drink and call dirt out, just to be there and want to see someone succeed through the healing of laughter and therapy altogether. I think it's fantastic. I mean, I know very early in my recovery, the group therapist that was working with me pushed me to, share my stories. And I noticed that I just, by no intention, when somebody laughed, it was immediately like giving me the right to not take it to this place where I thought I was supposed to take it, just shame and self-regret. And it was just sort of like, oh, I didn't know I had the option of seeing it like that, from a sort of an objective perspective. And it changed my life.
It's that universality, isn't it? And it's that sharing. And when we share and people laugh, it's because they have an identification with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, in that knowing that we're not alone in it, and that you understand me, you understand what I'm telling you, because comedy is a great tool to bring people into your world. Instead of just writing some words on a piece of paper, this person is depressed, this person has anxiety, you don't see anything other than these labels and stereotypes. But when you see somebody who's depressed, but they're actually, engaging and lovable and kind and enthusiastic and all of these things, you see this sort of the full spectrum of the human, and you see yourself there. And then there's this kind of magic that happens.
Well, it gives us permission to smile again. I mean, I remember, I wasn't like Darren. I didn't do the treatment circuit for a decade. I didn't know anything about help. I never asked for help. And then life got so bad where I kind of got forced into treatment. And I just remember, like, I had never been to group. I had never been in an area where somebody was going to be counseling me. I thought it was going to be a cry session. I thought it was going to be like, I thought I needed to be punished. And I thought, like, I've done all this bad stuff that I shouldn't be laughing and having fun. Like, this is this is a serious matter. People are dying, and then you have that moment where you come back to life again, and to be able to smile. There's a freedom in that. And did you feel that freedom?
Absolutely. I mean, I've always been, my dad is very, very funny, and he'll, I can say anything to him, very seriously, and he'll say something ridiculous. Like, I'll say, we're just, I remember I was doing a really deep genogram, and look at all the difficulty, all the trauma and loss that had happened up the family line. And I got really upset. And I said, my dad's in recovery, by the way. My dad's like one of my champions. And he said, and I said to him, Dad, we're all just so mentally ill in our family. And he went, welcome to the human race. What do you expect? And I was like, he's like, welcome to being alive. And I was just, and then I start laughing. Yeah. And it's that, okay, this is the reality, isn't it? It's like, we have to make room to cry. We have to make room to grieve and for sadness and everything like that. But there's no reason why laughter can't coexist with that therapy.
That's a wonderful, wonderful statement. I hope that transcends across the entire continuum of care. And where does laughter play a role in this? Where does hilarity play a role in this? The website is hilarity.ca. Is that correct?
.com.
Sorry, hilarity.com. They're also on Facebook. Lizzie Allen, thanks for being on the show, Lizzie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing information about future shows. And this isn't just for people in addiction. It's anybody that needs help.
Anyone who wobbles. So that's pretty much anyone who can admit it.
If you think this will help you out, check it out at their website. Talk Recovery Radio comes to you live every Thursday, powered by New West Recovery, Canada's recovery community, last door in Westminster House. And Darren, good to see you again. Looking forward to being in the studio soon.
Always a pleasure. I'm just so happy that we can get these conversations continued. And check out Lizzie's website. I mean, what a perfect time to look for some levity in all, situation right now. So thanks for coming on the show, and our other guest, Matthew Johnston. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Take care, everyone. See you next Thursday. Bye.
Bye.